Story 1-1. Critical thinking. Being comfortable alone. Minding your own business. Not caring. Story 2. Learning how to regulate your emotions makes communication, decision-making, and relationships much easier. But most people are never taught how. Story 3. How to learn. Actually learning how to break things down, research, and teach yourself anything. In a world that keeps changing, that is a superpower. Story 4. Mathematics. People are generally so averse to learning mathematics, and yet it is very important to our daily lives. Consequently, if you have a general good grasp of mathematics, people immediately think you are a genius. Story 5. Basic computer skills have been around for about 30 years, but some people still know just enough to be dangerous and cause problems. Story 6. 1. How to have a conversation with just about anybody. It is a learned skill, not a knack. It hinges on a simple principle. Be more interested in talking about the other person than yourself. Master that, and you become the best conversationalist in the room. How to give a speech or presentation. A mediocre idea well presented will always win out over a great idea presented in a mediocre way. The better an idea is, the better you have to present it because it represents a departure from the tried and true. If you have never had a public speaking class, take one. It will help you in just about every sphere of life. How to learn. Many people stop truly learning when they leave school. It is almost as if they become set like concrete. Instead, prepare yourself to learn new things. Do not be intimidated. Of course, the first few times you try, you will not be good at it. But over time, you will get better. Then, you will know how to do something new and valuable. Story 7. Time management is important. I dislike that it has become acceptable to be late to everything and not respect other people's time. Story 8. The skill to apply past experiences when facing new situations and to maintain this process continuously improves the current state. Story 9. How to consider things from a different viewpoint would honestly solve many conflicts between people. Story 10. Basics of cars such as changing a flat tire, oil changes, and understanding how a car works would save everyone a lot of money and help prevent mechanics from overcharging car owners who know little about cars. I hear many cars on the road making horrible noises, like loose exhaust heat shields, which could be fixed with a piece of lashing wire. However, they are guaranteed to take it to a mechanic who will charge them $1,000. Story 11. Knowing basic car maintenance is important. If you drive, you should know how to change a tire, top up your fluids, check the oil, and fill tires to the correct pounds per square inch. Story 12. Financial literacy. How to balance a budget, create savings goals, and understand what living within one's means realistically looks like. Story 13. Minding their own business and realizing what people do with their own lives should not affect their own. Story 14. Let others have a turn to speak. You should be able to acknowledge that no one cares when you spend the whole conversation talking about yourself. Story 15. How to unclog a toilet. How to aim when they urinate for males. How to clean up after themselves. How to drive. How to say please, thank you, and other common decencies. Story 16-1. Knowledge of how to approach a problem and how to search for an answer on the internet. People should learn how to use the internet effectively. Critical thinking is important. I have met many people with doctorates who lack basic deduction skills. One thing I have learned after meeting such people is that knowledge does not equal smartness. Story 17. In my generation, cooking is crazy. Many young adults have no idea how to cook something slightly more complicated than a fried egg, plain chicken, or pasta. Story 18. Understanding logical fallacies. If you have no understanding of them as a population, problems will inevitably happen. Children as young as 4 can begin understanding them. Start as young as possible because fallacies are not covered nearly anywhere before college. Story 19. Touch typing. I don't mean 80 words per minute level, but basic typing. I literally learned it in about a week and a half because a job application and interview required it. Story 21. How to live off the land. 2. Preserving food. 3. Learning which plants are good for healing and eating in case of famine. 4. How to do handiwork, including sewing. Story 21. Writing well and managing people. You manage people, whether they are clients, colleagues, or supervisors, and maintain relationships regardless of your position in an organization. Story 22. How to peacefully de-escalate a difficult situation. Being able to calm others improves your ability to stay calm yourself. Story 23. Almost everyone takes on projects beyond their skill level and relies on YouTube to help them. Learn how to frost a cake smoothly if you want to renovate. The ability to make a soft material smooth, flat, and even by eye can be the difference between mediocre and amazing for many types of projects. Learning and making mistakes on a cake is inexpensive. You will be tempted at some point, but trying this on an otherwise $3,000 professional or $500 do-it-yourself tile job to save $2,000 is not a good idea. However, do-it-yourself usually can be a good option. Story 24. Understanding the true value of momentary happiness means knowing that life is a cycle of ups and downs. The search for happiness does not exist, as it is special precisely because it only lasts a moment. What you should seek is peace, so that when happiness comes, you can enjoy it to the fullest. Story 25. I am far away from that goal, but I would like to be able to do a full pull-up. I want to be able to lift my own body weight. I do not know about the part where most people cannot do pull-ups. It is highly likely that most people can do pull-ups fine. Just me, an elderly lady, cannot. Story 26. Expecting less. Things are as they are, not as they should be. It is not about what you want. It is about what is. Story 27. First aid. People die because they do not know what to do in the first few minutes of an accident. Story 28. I understand, read the room. I tend to overthink when it comes to people, so I feel unsure if the person is okay or not. Story 29. Being completely independent and finding a productive hobby, whether it is physically productive or mentally productive. Story 30. To think about others and not behave like a fool when it comes to other people's matters, especially parking like an idiot. Story 31. How to read and spell words. I have friends who are teachers, and they tell me that most students these days read and spell well below their grade level. I am talking about middle school and high school students well below. Story 32. How to recognize and challenge your own assumptions. How to learn something new, especially if it contradicts something you once thought you knew. Story 33. Reading the room. Some people still have not realized that not every situation requires their input. Sometimes silence is a skill. Story 34. Someone said being a good driver. Many people said patch a tire, but also driving a manual transmission. Story 35. If you asked a substantial portion of the population to write a report about a traffic incident or a complaint to the cereal company that there were not enough cereal flakes in the pack, most would do a very amateur job. Believe it or not, it is very difficult to find people who can write coherently and technically precisely. Story 36. Positive self-talk. Of all the people in the world, you talk to yourself the most. Make sure it is a great conversation. Story 37. How to argue like an adult. Do not shout and scream. Do not cover your ears or ignore the other person. How to present a point maturely and agree to disagree. Story 38. How to swim. As a person who works in aquatics, knowing how to swim, even if it is just to reach a wall or a riverbank if you fall in, can save your life. Story 39. Critical thinking, troubleshooting, and problem solving. These skills are universally applicable. Identifying the problem is 90% of solving it. Story 40. Lockpicking. Like many things in life, it is better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Story 41. Pedagogy. I believe everyone should receive this education in high school. Many people do not understand what they are getting into when having children. I am not saying that everyone is a bad parent, but I think everyone should learn the basics of how to care for a child. Story 42. Learning how to accept criticism without letting emotions take control and how to remain focused under pressure. Story 43. 1. Being polite. 2. Being kind. 3. Being respectful. 4. Letting go of your hatred, not a skill, more of a path in life. 5. Keeping public toilets clean after use. Story 44. Saying no without explaining yourself took me years to master. I used to write paragraphs justifying why I couldn't do something, but now a simple no or that doesn't work for me does the trick. Story 45. First aid or similar. If you cannot do it, at least you know what to do or what not to do, like cardiopulmonary resuscitation or Heimlich maneuver. Story 46. How to identify and correct distorted thinking. How to recognize the misuse of statistics. Business ethics. How to sell products. How to escape from an abusive partner. Story 47. 1. How to save money. How to drive. How to swim. Learn to focus. Do not worry about what people say about you. Story 48. Surprisingly, a good portion of the human population is less literate than they should be in either reading or writing. I work with someone who literally cannot read or write, and she is a few years older than I am. I do not mean Shakespeare level, but at least the basics. Story 49. How to read and plan with a map. Do not follow the global positioning system blindly. Instead, pull up a map and plan a route. Learn the major roads and areas and how to orient yourself. Story 50. General understanding of physics and the ability to imagine a simple trajectory are important. People should spend some time playing games that help develop these skills. It also improves coordination and multitasking ability to some extent. Story 51. Accepting when you are wrong. Apologizing when necessary. Understanding that forgiveness is not essential to moving on. Knowing when to remain silent. Story 52. Every man should know one good joke, one good magic trick, how to drive a manual transmission vehicle, and how to change a tire. Story 53. How to apologize. Avoid using phrases like, sorry you felt. Equally important is knowing how and when to accept an apology. You do not have to automatically forgive someone. Story 54. Learning. Many people believe they are not responsible for learning anything independently, and that if someone does not explicitly teach them a specific skill or piece of knowledge, they cannot acquire it. This is a strange mindset. You are expected to figure out most things on your own, even if that means seeking out resources and the help of others. Story 55. Etiquette and proper decorum are important. Many people do not know how to conduct themselves properly in public and social situations. For example, move your bag to let someone sit on the subway train, and it is common sense not to clip your toenails on a public bench. Story 56. If you are kind and courteous on the road, the world will actually be a kinder and more courteous place, both in your mindset and in the material world. Story 57. How to read the manufacture date on a tire. The 4-digit number represents the week of manufacture, 01 to 52. And the last 2 digits represent the year of manufacture. For example, 0225 indicates a tire manufactured in the second week of 2025. Story 58. Other than the popular term financial literacy, I think learning how to work on uncommonly common things is important. These include working on your vehicle, such as tire changing, oil changes, filter changes, jump starting, and changing brakes and rotors. Also, learning how to work on household items like drywall hole patching, basic plumbing, light and ceiling fan installation, and changing your outlets. Many of these skills are connected, but learning to do them is as easy as watching a video with a little motivation. This will also save a significant amount of money on labor costs. Story 59-1. Basic awakening formula. Gradient of function equals psi of delta p plus constant equals E infinity. Wake. When change is detected, the wave of consciousness and invariant truth merge, resulting in awakening with infinite energy. Story 60. The secret of the infinite loop. If change is not empty, then there exists awakening such that the loop continues. As long as change does not cease, awakening continues to circulate. Story 61. 1. The ability to accept differing opinions. Learn to drive, which is common, but some people do not. Some form of self-defense. Story 62. I am actually torn between writing a book and starting a petition on the evolution of education, where real-life topics become mandated in school. I am glad I came across this post and appreciate the discussions below. Story 63. Learn what money is and how to use it. It does not matter what you do, just that you do it and then improve along the way. When you have a problem, learn. Most people will just ask ChatGPT, Google, or watch videos on YouTube, but few read. Reading books is essential for growth. Learning does not do much if you do not take action. So just start. Story 64. Swimming. I find it strange that some people do not know how to swim. In fact, I think every parent has the responsibility to teach their children at a young age. It is a survival skill and definitely not a choice, especially for people living in cities near water. Story 65. Critical thinking helps you evaluate information objectively, especially in an age of misinformation, hype, and manipulation. Story 66. How to change a tire by yourself. Many people wait until it is too late because they believe it will never happen to them. Story 67. How to write. Most children today struggle to hold anything in their hands because parents just give them a tablet or phone to stop them from screaming. Children are not developing the hand strength needed to hold a pen, pencil, or crayon. Story 68. Enough basic biology and anatomy to be your own healthcare advocate. As someone who works in healthcare, I can say that most people know very little about their body and health. It is really helpful to understand laboratory tests, common ailments, drug classes, and normal organ functions when faced with your own illness or caring for a loved one. Story 69. My daughter had a class similar to that, very limited in what they covered. I had to teach myself because my parents did not really know. Story 70. For some reason, people are not teaching their children how to eat with a knife and fork. They do not know how to cut food properly and only use the fork. Story 71. Changing your car oil is important. Can cost around $100 to have it done. Come on, ladies, lift your skirts and get under the hood. Story 72. Faking emotions and hiding them well helps, especially in family functions and when you are working. Story 73. Learning an instrument. As a musician, learning an instrument on a basic level was not enough for me. But a basic understanding of an instrument or music as a whole is invaluable. Music is truly a universal language, the only one we have that does not involve violence. Story 74. Sign language. When I went to school about 30 years ago, French, Spanish, and German were compulsory for every child. While being multilingual can be useful, the majority of people never use it much. However, there were actual deaf children in my school who could only communicate properly with a handful of people. Story 75. 1. Self-defense. 2. Braille. 3. Sign language. 4. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation and other methods to save lives. 5. Money-related tasks and issues. Story 76. Most prominent signs of sexual frustration include losing confidence, difficulty speaking in front of people, becoming addicted to things, starting to collect material items, trying to hide oneself, and faking personality traits. Story 77. How to use a search engine. The easiest approach is to stop typing questions like, "How do I do X?" Instead, search for X and add 1 or 2 keywords to narrow your search. Story 78. I am not a technology expert. I usually search for the issue online, and 90% of the time, when the information is incorrect, I simply turn the device off and on again. Story 79. Reading and comprehension. Too many times I say to myself about other people, if you could read, you would be very upset. Story 80. How to listen to someone's problems without turning it into a competition. My brother does this. No matter what you complain about, he always has a worse problem. Story 81. I think you best learn financial literacy by coping with the consequences of a financial mistake. Irresponsible spending will teach you valuable lessons, and you will discover levels of humility you never thought you had. The wisdom that follows on money matters is remarkable. Story 82. How to put out a fire with baking soda. Many people who do not have a working fire extinguisher do have baking soda. I have told this story before, but it is worth retelling. When I lived in an apartment, one evening a crash and a scream came from the next unit. A moment later, My roommate exclaimed, "It's a fire!" I was in my first job out of college and had not bought a fire extinguisher, but I had a 2-pound box of baking soda. For some reason, our kitchen also had a 1-pound box of baking soda. I grabbed them both and headed across the landing. The neighbor had second-degree burns on her arm. Smoke was billowing into her living room. After asking whether she had any other injuries, which she did not, I sent her to my apartment and recommended she fill a basin with cold water and soak her arms as first aid. After she nodded and started that, the next thing to deal with was the kitchen fire. It was already nightmarish. Everything on the neighbor's kitchen counter was in flames, the roll of paper towels was burning, and the wooden cabinets were starting to burn. I handed 1 box of baking soda to my roommate and said, "Here, use this." "It is too late," my roommate protested. "Do it anyway." The two of us emptied nearly 3 pounds of baking soda over the fire. This extinguished the fire, but we had to crawl out of the kitchen because the only clean air was near the floor. From there, we opened a window in the living room, leaned out and gasped. At that time, I did not know about renter's insurance, which is really good to have in situations like this. There is no telling how far that fire might have spread before the fire department arrived. The neighbor who started the fire was really embarrassed and admitted she had been trying to make French fries. She had let the oil get so hot it was smoking, and then, in a careless moment, she decided to put out the smoke with a glass of water. Everything splattered. She got burns on both forearms, and the kitchen caught fire. I cannot vouch fully for the accuracy of this description, but that is how she told it. Story 83. Riding a horse is pointless but used to be important. I would love it to be a common skill because of tradition. Story 84. Leverage and ambiguity, strong duality and weak duality. It is the same reason that when you are walking around, you wear your backpack on the front instead of the back, and you keep one hand in your backpack instead of outside it while you are around police. These are complex concepts, and it is very hard to create a valid analogy using language instead of mathematics. However, you can see that people would use these skills every day if they could. They are very quick to invert situations. Story 85. I feel most people need to do a system check. Many intelligent people do not realize they sound inarticulate. Many handsome men have poor hygiene. Many beautiful women do not realize they do things that turn others off. I think it is because everyone lives life thinking they are right, but we would all benefit if we took one full day to assess everything about ourselves. If we only wait for someone to tell us what we are doing wrong, we slow down our growth. Story 86. Empathy. I think this world would be drastically different if everyone learned to be curious or ask questions about something they do not understand or do themselves instead of outright rejecting it. Story 87. Learning another language. A lot of the world is bilingual. However, there are many countries or even cities where that is not the case. Learning another language lowers your chances of Alzheimer's disease and keeps your brain sharp. Story 88. There are many good skills to learn, such as critical thinking and financial literacy. A slightly less high-stakes skill is learning to sharpen a knife. It is both fun and useful. Story 89. Critical thinking, being able to be alone comfortably, financial literacy, doing laundry and cleaning after oneself, independence. Story 90. Active listening. Most people hear to reply, not to understand. It is underrated but changes everything. Story 91. How to be quiet, listen, and not take everything personally. Seriously. Half of life is realizing not everything is about you, and that silence is not always an attack. Story 92. How to give a good oral sex. You would be surprised to see how many times you get what you want or need with a well-done oral sex. Story 93. We get young people at work who do not know how to change a tire or jumpstart a battery. It is not a big deal at work, as we can send someone to help. But what if you are on your own somewhere or not close to home? It is not their fault. Nobody ever taught them. Story 94. At least one other language. I am not sure about most people, but I feel it has held many of us back who only know one. Story 95. Drive stick. Manage money. Make scratch meals. Talk to people who think completely differently than you do. Story 96. Basic computer literacy means knowing how to search for information online and how to save and organize files effectively. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.